Amidst the glittering splendor of a luxurious party, the powerful Chaebol Kim Min-jun witnesses the silent humiliation of Lee Ji-eun, a dishwasher struggling against eviction. Moved by her dignity and resilience, he decides to intervene, changing her destiny with an act of kindness that transcends social status. The soft clinking of crystal glasses and the elegant murmur of the gala party seem to amplify the humiliation unfolding in the corner of the ballroom. Lee Ji-eun, in her modest dishwasher's uniform, tried to blend into the shadows, invisible. But fate, or perhaps the cruelty of others, had other plans. A corpulent guest, his face flushed with wine and arrogance etched into every gesture, gesticulated vehemently. This was Mr. Park, a real estate mogul known for his lack of tact. Moments before, he had bumped into Ji-eun, who was carrying an empty tray, spilling a glass of champagne onto his own jacket. "Well, you clumsy girl, can't you watch where you're going?" Mr. Park bellowed, ignoring the fact that he was the one who had moved awkwardly. "Look what you've done. This suit cost more than you earn in a year, girl." Ji-eun felt her blood run cold. Her eyes, which had been scanning the floor for an escape, were now fixed on the marble, where the champagne foamed. A wave of heat rose up her neck, not from shame for the stain, but from the exposure, the injustice. Mr. Park's words were like lashings, each one echoing the harsh reality of her existence. The rent debt, the threat of eviction, the desperate need to keep this job, it all weighed on her, turning anger into a dull ache. I'm so sorry, sir," Ji-eun murmured, her voice almost inaudible as she grabbed a napkin from a nearby table, trying futilely to wipe the stain from the man's jacket. Her hands trembled slightly, but her posture, though bowed in deference, maintained a stubborn dignity. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of everyone. Mr. Park, however, was not satisfied. "Sorry? That won't pay for the dry cleaning, will it? People like you should be more careful. You're a stain on this party." He pushed her hand away, making the napkin fall. Across the room, Kim Min-jun observed the scene. He was engaged in a superficial conversation with the minister, but his sharp, perceptive eyes had caught the incident from the start. He saw Mr. Park bump into Ji-eun, saw the glass fall, and heard the cruel words. Min-jun was a man accustomed to seeing life from above, to dealing with astronomical figures and market strategies. But at that moment, something within him stirred. He didn't just see an employee being reprimanded. He saw the quietness in her eyes, the way she swallowed the humiliation, the silent strength with which she refused to crumble. It wasn't Ji-eun's physical beauty that touched him, though she possessed a natural delicacy, but the resilience in her spirit, the unwavering dignity she displayed amidst public pain. He had witnessed countless displays of weakness and victimhood among the wealthy. The strength of that young woman, in her vulnerability, was something rare and deeply moving. A knot formed in his stomach. This wasn't right. That man had no right to crush someone's spirit in such a way. Min-jun, a man of few words but decisive actions, felt an urgency he rarely experienced. He needed to intervene not out of charity, but out of a sense of justice and an unexpected respect for this unknown young woman. With a discreet nod to the minister, Min-jun excused himself and began to walk towards the commotion. His steps were firm but silent, and his presence, even before he arrived, already seemed to alter the atmosphere. Mr. Park was still ranting, and Ji-eun, head bowed, seemed to shrink. Min-jun stopped a few feet from Mr. Park. "Mr. Park," his voice was calm, but carried an unquestionable authority that made the businessman fall silent mid-sentence. "I believe there's a misunderstanding here." Mr. Park turned, surprised by the interruption. Upon seeing Kim Min-jun, the most influential Chaebol of the night, his face paled slightly. "Mr. Kim, I was just... This girl is so clumsy." Minjun ignored Mr. Park, and to everyone's surprise, including Ji-un, who slowly raised her eyes, he approached her. With a gentle and respectful movement, he took an impeccably white silk handkerchief from the inner pocket of his jacket and extended it to her. "Please," he said, his voice soft but clear, "clean your hands. And don't worry about Mr. Park's suit, I'll take care of it." The gesture was unexpected, a ray of light amidst the darkness of humiliation. Ji-un looked at the handkerchief, then at Min-jun's eyes, which met hers with an intensity she had never seen. At that moment, amidst the party's splendor, an invisible thread of destiny was weaving between them, promising a change she could never have imagined. The immaculate white silk handkerchief seemed to radiate a light of its own in Ji-un's hands. She held it as if it were a precious, fragile object, fearing to stain it with her own hands, still damp from dishwashing. Her eyes, previously fixed on the floor, now rose to meet Kim Min-jun's. In them, she saw no pity, nor the morbid curiosity that so many other guests displayed. There was a seriousness, a calm that enveloped her, a silent promise that for that brief instant, she was safe. I don't know what to say, sir," Ji-un murmured, her voice choked with emotion. The simple gesture, laden with respect, disarmed her in a way Mr. Park's cruel words never could. It was as if, amidst that sea of indifference, an anchor of kindness had been cast. Mr. Park, meanwhile, was pale. The presence of Kim Min-jun, the man who could determine the success or failure of his businesses with a simple phone call, was a shock. He tried to regain his composure, a forced smile stretching across his face. "Mr. Kim, please, don't trouble yourself with this trivial situation. I was just teaching this careless employee a lesson." Min-jun turned slowly to Mr. Park, and the businessman's smile withered under the Chaebol's cold, penetrating gaze. "Mr. Park," Min-jun said, his voice maintaining its calm tone, but with an edge of steel that left no room for doubt, "I believe the lesson here is about decency and respect, and judging by your conduct, you are the one who needs to learn it." Min-jun's words fell like thunder in the ballroom, silencing the murmurs around them. Some guests, who had been discreetly observing, now stopped their conversations to witness the scene. Mr. Park swallowed hard, his face taking on a purplish hue. He knew he had crossed a line, and Min-jun's reputation for being ruthless with those who disrespected him or his principles was well known. I apologize, Mr. Kim," Mr. Park stammered, bowing slightly. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Min-jun did not respond directly. His eyes returned to Ji-un, who still held the handkerchief wide-eyed. "Miss Lee," he said, completely ignoring Mr. Park, "there's no need to apologize for anything. The incident was an accident, and Mr. Park's reaction was, to say the least, disproportionate." He paused, and then, with surprising gentleness, added, "You don't deserve to be treated this way." Those words, "You don't deserve to be treated this way," struck Ji-un more deeply than any insult. They validated her pain, her humiliation, and made her feel seen for the first time in a long time. A stubborn tear rolled down her face, but she quickly wiped it away with her uniform sleeve before Min-jun could notice. I thank you, sir," she managed to say, her voice still a whisper. Min-jun took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I have a proposal for you, Miss Lee," he began, his voice lower now, almost confidential, but still audible to Mr. Park, who remained standing like a statue. "It's not an apology on his behalf, nor charity. It's an opportunity, a chance to get out of this situation and build a life where your dignity is always respected." Ji-un looked at him, confused. A proposal? What kind of proposal? Her mind, accustomed to calculating every penny and fighting for every day, couldn't process the idea of an opportunity coming from someone like him. The risk of eviction, the pile of bills, the exhausting routine, all of this was her reality. I understand this may seem sudden, Minjun continued as if reading her thoughts. But I saw your resilience, your strength. And I believe you deserve far more than life has given you. I can offer you a path to that. He extended his hand, not to touch her, but as a silent invitation. Come with me. Let me help you find a new beginning. Ji-un's heart raced. It was madness, it was dangerous, but the alternative was to go back to the kitchen, to humiliation, to the uncertainty of tomorrow. Kim Min-jun's outstretched hand was not just an invitation, it was a life raft in a stormy sea. She hesitated for a second, the weight of the world on her shoulders, and then, with a thread of hope she didn't know she still possessed, made an almost imperceptible movement. "Yes, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but laden with a decision that would change everything. I accept." Minjun nodded, an almost imperceptible glint in his eyes. He turned to the event manager who had approached, drawn by the commotion. "Please prepare a car for Miss Lee. She will not be returning to work tonight. And as for Mr. Park, I suggest he reflect on his actions before attempting to do business with any of my associates again." The manager, pale, nodded hastily. Minjun then turned to Ji-un, a slight smile gracing his lips. "Come, Miss Lee, your workday is over." Ji-un, still holding the silk handkerchief, felt as if she were dreaming. She followed Minjun, leaving behind the party's splendor, Mr. Park's astonished gaze, and the life she knew heading towards an uncertain future, but one that, for the first time, seemed to carry the promise of hope. Ji-un's steps were hesitant, almost mechanical, as she followed Minjun out of the ballroom. The opulence of the party, once a source of dread and humiliation, now seemed a distant, unreal backdrop. The guests' gazes, a mix of curiosity, judgment, and strange admiration, pricked her skin. She still clutched the silk handkerchief in her hand, its softness a stark contrast to the rough fabric of her uniform. Mr. Park's face, a mask of humiliation and impotent rage, was the last image she caught before they turned down a corridor. The night air was cool and damp, a welcome relief from the stifling heat of the ballroom. A sleek black sedan, polished to a mirror shine, awaited them. The driver, a man in an impeccable uniform, opened the rear door with a respectful nod to Minjun. Ji-un slid into the luxurious leather seat, the cool material against her tired legs. The car was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine. She felt small, out of place, like a stray cat that had accidentally crept into a palace. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of disbelief and apprehension. Was this real? Had she truly abandoned her job, the only world she knew, with a man she had just met? The rent debt, the eviction notice, her meager savings, all these anxieties still plagued her, but now a small, fragile sprout of hope had taken root in her chest. She glanced at Minjun, who sat beside her, his profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. He seemed calm, composed, as if rescuing a dishwasher from public humiliation and offering her a new life was an everyday occurrence. Minjun finally broke the silence, his voice a low, steady baritone. "Are you all right, Miss Lee?" Ji-un jumped slightly, startled. "Yes, sir, I'm fine." Her voice was almost a whisper. "You don't need to worry about Mr. Park or your job. That's been taken care of." He paused, then continued, "I know this is all very sudden. I don't expect you to trust me blindly, but I promised an opportunity, and I intend to deliver." Ji-un twisted the handkerchief in her hands. I don't know what to say. Why are you doing this?" The question escaped before she could stop it, raw and honest. Minjun turned to face her completely, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light. "I saw your strength, Miss Lee, your dignity. Amidst a humiliating situation, you refused to crumble. That is rare, and it is something I deeply respect." He didn't mention her beauty, only the resilience that had captivated him. I believe that people with such strength deserve a chance to prosper without being crushed by circumstances. His words resonated deeply within her. It wasn't pity, but recognition. A recognition of her struggle and her spirit. It was a balm for her wounded soul. But I'm just a dishwasher. I have nothing. You have more than you think. Miss Lee, you have character, and that is more valuable than any fortune. He offered a small, reassuring smile. For now, you need to rest. I've arranged a safe and comfortable place for you to spend the night. Tomorrow we can talk more calmly about the next steps. The car stopped in front of a modern, elegant building. It wasn't a hotel, but a high-end apartment complex. The lobby was tastefully decorated, quiet and exclusive. Ji-eun felt her heart race. This was a world completely alien to her. They took an elevator to a high floor. Min-jun opened the door to an apartment that took her breath away. It was spacious, elegantly furnished, with a panoramic view of the city lights, a stark contrast to her cramped, dilapidated room. "This is one of my apartments," Min-jun explained, noticing her wide eyes. "You can stay here as long as you need. There's food in the refrigerator and everything you might need to feel comfortable. A change of clean clothes has been left in the bedroom." He gestured towards a door. "Please, make yourself at home. I'll be back tomorrow morning to talk." He didn't linger, didn't make her feel indebted or uncomfortable. He simply provided with a silent efficiency that spoke volumes. Ji-eun stood in the middle of the luxurious living room, the silk handkerchief still clutched in her hand. The silence of the apartment was profound, broken only by the distant hum of the city. She walked to the window, watching the twinkling lights below. It felt like a dream, a fragile bubble that could burst at any moment. The exhaustion, the emotional whirlwind of the night finally caught up with her. A wave of tears, held back for so long, finally overflowed. But they weren't tears of sadness or humiliation. They were tears of overwhelming relief, of fragile hope, of a future that for the first time in a long time didn't seem entirely bleak. She was no longer just a dishwasher, invisible and disposable. Someone had seen her, someone cared, and that in itself was a miracle. Ji-eun's tears flowed freely, warm and salty, a dammed river finally finding its mouth. She didn't try to hold them back. She was exhausted, not just physically, but in a way that reached the core of her soul. The silk handkerchief, now damp, was still crumpled in her hand, a tangible testament to the night that had changed everything. She felt like a leaf carried by a powerful current, out of control, but strangely relieved not to be sinking alone anymore. The apartment was a sanctuary of luxury and silence. Every piece of furniture, every artwork, exuded a discreet elegance that contrasted brutally with the life she'd left behind. Ji-eun walked barefoot on the soft carpet, feeling the texture beneath her calloused feet. Her eyes scanned the living room. The polished gleam of the coffee table, the leather sofas that seemed to embrace anyone who sat on them. It was a world of comfort she never imagined existed outside of movie screens. Still in her work uniform, with sauce stains and the smell of grease ingrained, she felt like an intruder, a stain on that pristine setting. She approached the window again, the city view now blurred by the tears that still welled up. The distant lights looked like fallen stars, and she, a tiny particle observing a universe that didn't belong to her. "Is this real?" she whispered into the void, her voice hoarse. "Or am I dreaming?" Doubt was a persistent shadow. Kim Min-jun's generosity was so overwhelming, it bordered on the unreal. Why would he do this? He had spoken of dignity, of strength, of a chance. But what did he expect in return? Her mind, trained to distrust anything that seemed too good to be true, struggled to accept the purity of his intention. With a trembling sigh, Ji-eun turned from the city panorama and sought the bedroom Min-jun had indicated. The door opened to an even more intimate sanctuary. A king-size bed dominated the space, covered with silk sheets that seemed to invite rest. On an armchair, there was a change of clean clothes, a soft cotton t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants, neatly folded. Beside them, a pair of plush slippers. She touched the fabric of the t-shirt, feeling its softness. It was simple, but it felt like an unattainable luxury. Slowly, she began to take off her dirty uniform, piece by piece, feeling the weight of the day, of the humiliation, of the anxiety, detaching with each unbuttoned button. The silk handkerchief was carefully placed on the bedside table, a small treasure amidst so much opulence. In the adjacent bathroom, polished marble and spotless mirrors reflected her tired image. The hot water from the shower was a welcome shock, washing away not only the day's grime, but also some of the tension that stiffened her. She scrubbed her hair with fragrant shampoo, the floral scent a contrast to the kitchen smell that had accompanied her for years. It was as if she was purifying herself, preparing for something new, though she still didn't know what. After her shower, she put on the clean clothes. The soft cotton was a gentle hug against her skin. She felt a little more human, a little less like the humiliated dishwasher. Hunger, which had been suppressed by shock and adrenaline, now manifested in a soft rumble from her stomach. She returned to the kitchen, a marvel of stainless steel and modern appliances. She opened the refrigerator, finding it stocked with fresh fruit, yogurts, pre-made sandwiches, and juices. She took a yogurt and an apple, eating them slowly, savoring each bite. It was the first peaceful meal she'd had in a long time. Back in the bedroom, she lay down on the soft bed. The mattress seemed to embrace her, and the feather pillow was like a cloud. The silence was profound, broken only by the gentle hum of the city outside. She closed her eyes and the images of the night mingled. Mr. Park's furious face, Min Jun's outstretched hand, his words of recognition. There was still fear, an uncertainty about tomorrow, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't a paralyzing fear. It was a fear mixed with a tenuous hope, a curiosity about what fate or Kim Min Jun had in store for her. She fell asleep, the silk handkerchief still on the bedside table, a silent reminder that perhaps miracles really did happen. Ji-eun's sleep was deep and dreamless, a balm for her exhausted soul. When the morning light began to filter through the heavy curtains, she awoke with a sense of disorientation. For a brief moment she thought she was back in her cramped room, feeling the thin mattress and the smell of mold. But the silence was different, denser, and the air fresh and clean. She opened her eyes and found the high, smooth ceiling, the golden sunlight painting patterns on the walls. She rose slowly, feeling the weight of the silk sheets slide from her body. The sweatpants and cotton t-shirt were soft and comfortable, a welcome contrast to her rough uniform. She walked to the window, pulling back the curtains. The city stretched out below her, vibrant and full of life, but from a perspective she had never experienced. Tiny cars moved like insects, and the buildings seemed like towers from a distant kingdom. It was a view of power, of privilege, and she was in the midst of it. The silk handkerchief was still on the bedside table, a small square of color against the polished wood. She picked it up, feeling the familiar texture. It was the only tangible link to the previous night, to the humiliation and the unexpected intervention. The hope that had blossomed in her chest last night was still there, fragile but a little stronger in the light of day. However, uncertainty was a persistent fog. What did Min Jun really want? What kind of opportunity would he offer a dishwasher with no qualifications? She felt like an imposter. Every object in the apartment, the gleaming espresso machine in the kitchen, the hardcover books on the shelf, the abstract artworks on the walls, seemed to whisper that she didn't belong there. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have to worry about rent, about food, about exhausting work. It was a temporary truce, yes, but a welcome one. After a refreshing shower, she dressed again in the clothes Min Jun had provided. They were simple, but new and clean, and they made her feel a little more dignified. She tidied her hair, trying to look as presentable as possible. There was no makeup, no jewelry, just the simplicity of her clean face and eyes still a little swollen from the night of tears. Hunger returned, and she headed to the kitchen. She made some tea and took more fruit from the refrigerator. She sat at the kitchen table watching the city as she ate. Every bite was savored, every sip of tea a small luxury. She knew that this moment of calm was just the prelude to the conversation that would come. Minjun had promised to return in the morning. What would he say? What would he ask? Time seemed to drag. Every minute was an eternity of anticipation. She cleaned the teacup and fruit bowl, feeling the need to do something, anything, to fill the void. She checked the clock on the kitchen wall. It was only a few minutes before noon. He would be punctual, she imagined. A man like him, who moved with such precision, surely valued punctuality. A slight tremor ran through her body when she heard the soft sound of the doorbell. It wasn't a jarring ring, but a discreet, elegant ding-dong. Her heart pounded. It was him, the moment of truth. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She walked to the door, feeling the weight of the silk handkerchief in her hand, almost like an amulet. Minjun stood outside, impeccable in a dark suit, his gaze calm and penetrating. He didn't smile broadly, but his eyes conveyed a discreet kindness. "Good morning, Miss Lee," he said, his voice a soft baritone that filled the silence of the hallway. "I hope you had a peaceful night." Ji-eun felt a lump in her throat. "Good morning, Mr. Kim. Yes, I slept very well, thank you." Her voice was still a whisper, but there was a new determination in her eyes. She was no longer the humiliated dishwasher. She was Lee Ji-eun, and she was ready to hear what fate, or Kim Min-jun, had in store for her. He made a subtle gesture with his hand, indicating she didn't need to rush. "May I come in?" "Oh yes, of course, please," she hastened to say, opening the door wider. Min-jun entered, his gaze sweeping the apartment with a familiarity that contrasted with Ji-eun's apprehension. He didn't seem to be evaluating, but rather confirming that everything was in order. His eyes met hers for an instant, and she felt an unexpected warmth. "Please sit," he said, indicating one of the leather sofas in the living room. Ji-eun hesitated but obeyed, sitting on the edge of the seat, the silk handkerchief still crumpled in her hand. Min-jun sat on the opposite sofa, maintaining a respectful distance, but his gaze never ceased to be attentive. "Miss Lee," he began, his voice calm and thoughtful, "I know yesterday's situation was unexpected, and my offer perhaps even more so. I understand if there are doubts, if there is distrust." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "I don't expect you to trust me blindly, but I want you to understand my intentions." Ji-eun clutched the handkerchief. I don't know what to say, Mr. Kim. Your generosity is overwhelming. I've never received anything like this." "It's not charity, Miss Lee," Min-jun interrupted her gently but firmly. "It's recognition. I saw your strength, your dignity, even in the face of humiliation, and I believe that people with such resilience deserve a chance to show their true potential, free from the shackles of necessity." He leaned slightly forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "My intention is to offer you that chance, an opportunity for you to rise again without the immediate pressure of debts or the incessant search for a basic livelihood. I want you to have time to think, to study, to discover what you truly want to do with your life." Ji-eun felt a shiver. To study, to discover what she wanted. These were luxuries she had never imagined. "But what does that mean, Mr. Kim? What do you expect from me?" The old distrust, the fear that nothing came for free, still haunted her. Minjun smiled faintly, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but softened his features. For now, Miss Lee, I only expect you to accept this truce. This apartment is yours to use for as long as you need. All your expenses will be covered. There is no immediate work, no obligations, other than to take care of yourself and allow yourself to breathe. He continued, anticipating her next questions. Your rent and your debts will be settled. You don't need to worry about that. In return, I only ask that you consider the possibilities, that you think about what you would like to learn, what you would like to be, and when you are ready, we can talk about how I can help you achieve those goals. Ji-yoon was in shock. It was more than she could have dreamed of. It was a freedom she had never known. But there was still a void, a missing piece. Why me, Mr. Kim? She asked, her voice almost inaudible. Why so much for someone like me? Minjun's eyes deepened. Because I believe in you, Miss Lee. I believe in your ability to overcome. And because sometimes the right people appear at the most unexpected moments, and one must have the courage to reach out. I saw something in you that touched me deeply. It's not a matter of beauty or status, but of soul. He stood up, walking to the window and observing the city for a moment before turning to her again. There are no catches, Miss Lee. No fine print. Just an offer of support. Think about it, rest, and when you are ready to discuss in more detail, I will be available. Ji-yoon looked at the handkerchief in her hand, then at the man in front of her. Tears returned to her eyes, but this time they were not of pain or humiliation, but of overwhelming gratitude, mixed with a pang of hope. He wasn't asking for anything in return, just that she live, that she flourish. Mr. Kim, she began, her voice choked. I don't know how to thank you. He nodded, a gesture of understanding. You don't need to thank me now, Miss Lee. Just accept it and allow yourself a new beginning. With that, he headed for the door. I have some commitments now, but I'll be back tomorrow. Feel free to use anything you need. There's a phone in the kitchen. Should you need anything urgent, my number is pre-programmed. And with a final, gentle look, Kim Min-jun left, leaving Ji-yoon alone in the luxurious apartment, the silence filled with the echo of his words and the promise of a future that, until then, seemed impossible. She was still on the edge of the sofa, the silk handkerchief now wet with new tears, but the weight in her chest had considerably lessened. The miracle had become real. The echo of Min-jun's words lingered in the air, filling the silence he had left behind. Ji-yoon remained seated on the edge of the sofa, the silk handkerchief still crumpled in her hand, now damp with the tears that had flowed freely. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't an empty promise. He had said her debts would be settled, that she would have a home, that she would have time. Time. The word resonated in her mind like a forgotten melody. She looked at the door through which he had exited, as if expecting him to return to undo everything, to say it was a cruel joke. But the silence was absolute, and the reality of that luxurious apartment enveloped her. This place was hers. For now, expenses would be covered. She didn't have to worry about rent, the pressure that had crushed her for years, the constant fear of eviction, of hunger, of exhausting work. All of it had been magically suspended. A deep sigh escaped her lips, a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime of worries. She slowly rose, feeling her legs a little shaky. She walked to the window again, but this time the city below didn't seem so distant. It seemed like an invitation, a tapestry of possibilities that had previously been hidden by the fog of necessity. It's not charity, Miss Lee. Min-jun's voice returned to her mind. It's recognition. I saw your strength, your dignity. He believed in her. A man like him who possessed so much had seen something in her, an invisible dishwasher that most people didn't even notice. Still, a pang of distrust persisted, a remnant of the life she knew. No one gave something without asking for something in return, not in her reality. But he had been so clear. There are no catches, Miss Lee, no fine print, just an offer of support. She pressed the silk handkerchief against her chest. It was a gift from him, a symbol of that fateful day. Now, it represented more than humiliation. It represented the outstretched hand, the promise of a new beginning. Ji-eun walked around the room, touching the smooth surface of a coffee table, running her fingers over the books on the shelf. Think about what you would like to learn, what you would like to be. The idea was so strange, so alien. As long as she could remember, her life was about surviving. Learning was a luxury. Being was a matter of fitting into the mold society imposed on her. She found herself in the kitchen again, by the phone Min-jun had mentioned. She picked up the receiver and saw his number pre-programmed, a direct line to the man who had turned her world upside down. She had no one to call. Her life was solitary, filled only with work and struggle. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she had had tea and fruit minutes before. But now the tea and fruit seemed to taste different, the flavor of freedom. She closed her eyes, trying to absorb everything, the absence of noise, the absence of immediate worry. It was as if an immense weight had been lifted from her shoulders, allowing her to truly breathe for the first time in years. The tears had stopped, replaced by a thoughtful quietness. What did she want to learn? What did she want to be? The questions were daunting in their breadth. She had never allowed herself to dream so high. But now the door was open. Ji-eun stood up and went to the bedroom. The silk handkerchief was carefully folded and placed on the bedside table next to the soft bed. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was still a little pale. Her eyes still carried the mark of tears. But there was something new in them. A spark. A small flame of hope that was beginning to shine brighter. She was Lee Ji-eun, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she had a future. Not a future dictated by necessity, but a future that she, with the unexpected help of a mysterious millionaire, could begin to shape. The miracle had become real, and now she needed to learn to live in it. Time. The night fell gently over the city, and Ji-eun, lying in the luxurious bed, felt a comfort she never imagined possible. The soft mattress, the silk sheets, the silence. It was all so different from the thin, noisy mattress of her old rented room, where the creaking springs and street noise were the constant soundtrack to her exhaustion. She couldn't sleep. Her mind buzzed with possibilities, with questions. What would she do with the time, with the freedom? She got up again, drawn to the window. The city, now a sea of twinkling lights, seemed to whisper promises. Min-jun had told her to think. To think! It was a verb she rarely used in relation to herself, to her desires. It had always been about what she needed to do: work, pay, survive. The idea of choosing, of dreaming, was an atrophied muscle she barely knew how to exercise. She walked barefoot through the living room, feeling the soft carpet beneath her feet. Her eyes scanned the books on the shelf again. Titles she would never have had the time or money to even consider. History, art, philosophy, novels. An entire world of knowledge, of perspectives, was there, silently waiting. She reached out and picked up a random volume, a book of poetry. The cover was simple, but the feel of the paper, the smell of ink, was intoxicating. She opened it to a random page, and her eyes fell on verses that spoke of stars and destinies. It was as if the words had been written for her, for this exact moment of transition. Think about what you would like to learn, what you would like to be. Min-jun's voice echoed, but now not with the strangeness of before, but with a genuine invitation. She sat on the sofa, nestling among the soft cushions, and began to read. Not to understand deeply, but to feel, to allow the beauty of the words to envelop her. It was a simple yet profound luxury, an act of rebellion against the life of deprivation she had known. Time passed without her noticing. The city lights continued to shine, but Ji-yoon's focus was on the pages. Distrust was still there, a persistent shadow in the back of her mind. But with each verse read, with each moment of peace, it diminished a little. Min-jun had asked for nothing, only offered. And now she was accepting. Not as charity, but as an opportunity. When the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, Ji-yoon finally closed the book. A small, tired, but genuine smile played on her lips. She hadn't slept, but she felt more refreshed than in years. That first step, that of simply allowing herself to be, to absorb the quietness and beauty, had been taken. She was still Lee Ji-eun, the dishwasher. But now she was also the poetry reader, the dawn contemplator, the woman who was beginning to glimpse a future not dictated by necessity, but by hope. The miracle had become real, and she was starting to learn to live in it, one word, one verse, one dawn at a time. The day dawned fully, and the sun's rays flooded the apartment, revealing every luxurious detail that the dimness of night had softened. Ji-eun rose from the sofa, feeling a slight stiffness in her muscles, but a mental clarity she hadn't experienced in a long time. The poetry book was carefully placed back on the shelf, as if it were a newly discovered treasure. She walked to the kitchen, her stomach rumbling softly, a reminder that, although her mind was in ecstasy, her body still followed the laws of biology. She opened the refrigerator and found it stocked with a variety of fresh and healthy foods, fruits, yogurts, juices, breads. It was a stark contrast to the cheap leftovers she used to keep in her tiny refrigerator. She took an apple and a yogurt, sitting at the table. Each bite of the crisp apple felt like an act of rebellion against the hunger that had accompanied her for so long. "You don't have to worry about anything." Min-jun's voice resonated again. It was a phrase she was beginning to accept, but one that still felt unreal. Not to worry, it was a concept as strange as the idea of flying. Worry was her constant companion, her engine. Without it, what would drive her? After a peaceful breakfast, Ji-yoon found herself in front of the bathroom mirror. The reflected image was that of a tired woman, yes, but with a different sparkle in her eyes. She touched her face, feeling her soft skin. The hot water from the shower, the abundance of fragrant soaps and shampoos, everything was a luxury she had never allowed herself. It was as if every drop of water washed away not only the dirt, but also a little of the weight of her old life. Upon leaving the shower, she found herself facing a wardrobe that wasn't hers. Min-jun had mentioned that everything she needed would be provided. There were new clothes, simple and elegant in her size. She chose a comfortable set of pants and a cotton blouse. Wearing something that wasn't a work uniform or a worn, mended piece was a strange, almost liberating feeling. The day stretched out before her, a vast and unexplored territory. No work, no bills to pay, no urgent need to go out and fight for her survival. What would she do? The question, "What would you like to be?" hung in the air, challenging. She had no idea. Her life had always been about what she had to be. A tireless worker, a debtor, a shadow in society. Ji-eun walked to the window again, observing the city below. Rushing people, cars, the relentless routine. She was outside of it for now. A pang of guilt hit her. Was it right to enjoy all this while others struggled? But then the dignity Min-jun had seen in her reasserted itself. He hadn't rescued her out of pity, but out of recognition. He had given her a chance, not charity. She sat on the sofa, picked up the silk handkerchief and clutched it. It was a reminder of her humiliation, but also of her strength. And now, it was a reminder of the promise. Minjun had believed in her. She needed to believe in herself. "I need to learn," she whispered to the empty apartment. The idea of learning was no longer an unattainable luxury, but an urgent necessity, not to survive, but to flourish. She didn't know where to start, but Minjun's personal library, with its volumes of history, art, and philosophy, seemed like a good starting point. She didn't need a grand plan yet, just a step, and the first step would be to explore the knowledge within her reach. With newfound determination, Ji-un stood up and walked towards the bookshelf, ready to lose herself in a new world. A world she, for the first time, had the freedom to choose. Ji-un approached the bookshelf, a sanctuary of knowledge she never imagined having access to. Her fingers brushed the spines of the books, feeling the texture of leather, of paper, the silent promise of stories and wisdom. Minjun's library wasn't just a collection, it was a portal. She remembered her own library, a few old, crumpled school textbooks she had sold to pay a bill. The difference was abysmal, almost painful in its clarity. She hesitated, unsure where to begin. There were volumes on economics, international politics, Renaissance art, Eastern philosophy, a universe of disciplines that seemed as distant from her previous reality as the stars. "What would you like to learn?" Minjun's question echoed in her mind, but now with a different resonance. It wasn't, "What do you need to learn to survive?" but "What would you like?" The freedom contained in that question was almost frightening, a vastness she barely knew how to navigate. Her eyes landed on a book with a simple yet elegant cover about Korean art history, something familiar yet new. She had always loved beauty, even if her life didn't allow her to appreciate it beyond a brief glimpse. She picked up the volume, feeling its pleasant weight in her hands. She sat on the floor, leaning against the bookshelf, and opened the book. The pages revealed vibrant images of Goryeo ceramics, Joseon paintings, traditional architecture. She lost herself in the colors, the forms, the stories behind each artifact. It wasn't a formal study, but an immersion. She wasn't trying to memorize dates or names, but to absorb the essence, the soul of those creations. It was as if, through art, she could connect with a part of herself that had been suppressed by daily struggle. Beauty was a balm for her tired soul, a gentle melody that calmed internal storms. Time flew. The morning sun gave way to the softer light of midday, and then to late afternoon. Ji-shun felt no hunger, no thirst, only a thirst for knowledge, for understanding. She flipped through page after page, stopping at each image, reading the descriptions with an almost forgotten, childlike curiosity. It was a new sensation, this learning for pure pleasure, without the pressure of an exam or the need for a diploma to get a job. As she read about the resilience of Korean artists in times of adversity, a new perspective opened up. Art was not just a luxury. It was a form of expression, of resistance, of preserving identity. She thought of her own life, her own resilience. Perhaps she also had her own form of art, her own story to tell, shaped by her struggles and her dignity. There was still a pang of uncertainty, an inner voice whispering about the transience of it all. What if Minjun changed his mind? What if she wasn't worthy of such generosity? But then she remembered the silk handkerchief, his firm and respectful gaze. He didn't see her as a poor wretch, but as someone with strength and dignity. And if he saw that in her, perhaps she should start seeing it too. When the golden light of sunset began to tint the apartment, Ji-yun closed the book. Her eyes were a little tired, but her mind was vibrant. She had spent the entire day immersed in a world previously inaccessible to her. She hadn't solved all her problems, nor had she mapped out a life plan. But she had taken a crucial step. She had allowed herself to learn, allowed herself to feel, allowed herself to dream. She stood up, stretching her muscles. The apartment seemed different now, less intimidating, more welcoming. It wasn't just a luxurious place, it was a space of possibilities. She walked to the window, watching the city lights come on again. The city, which once represented struggle, now seemed like an invitation. Minjun hadn't called, he hadn't appeared, and strangely that reassured her. He had given her space, time. He had trusted her to use that freedom, and she was starting to do so. The path ahead was still hazy, but the darkness of uncertainty had diminished, replaced by a faint glow of self-confidence. She was no longer just the dishwasher. She was Lee Ji-eun, and she was beginning to discover who this woman could be. And Minjun's library, with its infinite worlds, was becoming her first teacher. Twilight deepened, and the city lights shone like a sea of stars on the ground. Ji-eun felt a gentle hunger, a reminder that despite intellectual nourishment, her body still needed food. She went to the kitchen and prepared a simple dinner with the fresh ingredients she found, a salad and some rice. As she ate, sitting at the kitchen table, the silence of the apartment was different from before. It wasn't an oppressive silence, but a silence of peace, filled with the new ideas and images that inhabited her mind. Suddenly, the soft sound of the elevator arriving on the floor broke the quiet. Her heart gave a little jump. Minjun. She stood up, feeling a mix of nervousness and a strange expectation. The key turned in the lock and the door opened. Kim Minjun entered, his suit impeccable, his face showing the fatigue of a long day's work, but his eyes, upon meeting hers, softened immediately. A discreet smile played on his lips. "Good evening, Ji-eun," he said, his voice calm and welcoming. He took off his jacket, hanging it with a familiar gesture. "I hope you had a pleasant day." Ji-eun felt a warmth spread in her chest. There was no demand, no judgment in his tone, only genuine concern. "Good evening, Mr. Kim. Yes, it was. It was very good, thank you." She hesitated for a moment, feeling a little awkward in his presence, but the excitement of her day propelled her. I spent the day in your library." Minjun paused, turning to her with renewed interest. "Oh, really? And what drew you in?" "I started with a book on Korean art history," she replied, her eyes shining. "It's fascinating. The Goryeo ceramics, the Joseon paintings, the way art reflects the soul of a people, their resilience. I never had the chance to truly see or learn about it." He watched her, a glint of satisfaction in his gaze. He noticed the change in her posture a little straighter, the sparkle in her eyes that wasn't fear or exhaustion, but curiosity and discovery. The dignity he had seen in her at the party was now blossoming. "Art is a window to the human soul, indeed," Minjun agreed, walking towards the living room. "I'm glad you found something that interests you. The library is at your disposal. There are many worlds to be explored there." He sat in an armchair, loosening his tie. "You look different, lighter." Ji-eun blushed slightly but didn't look away. I think so. It's strange not having to worry about tomorrow, about rent, about food. Having time to think, to learn. It's a luxury I never imagined." She clasped her hands, the silk handkerchief he had given her still in her pocket, a silent reminder of where it all began. "I don't know how to thank you." "There's no need for thanks. Ji-eun," he said softly, his gaze firm and sincere. "I didn't bring you here to make you feel indebted. I brought you because I saw something in you that deserved a chance to be more than circumstances allowed you to be, and to see that sparkle in your eyes today. That's the only reward I need." The air between them seemed to vibrate with a new understanding. It wasn't just a millionaire and a former dishwasher. It was a man who saw potential and a woman who was beginning to believe in it. What would you like to do tomorrow? Min-jun asked, his voice breaking the silence, but in a gentle way. Continue exploring art, or perhaps there's something else that intrigues you. Ji-eun thought for a moment. The world of possibilities opening up was vast and a little daunting, but now it was also exciting. I'd like to continue learning, perhaps about Korean history, to better understand the context of the art, and maybe at some point I can discover what I truly want to do, what I would like to be. Min-jun smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his tired face. That's an excellent start, and don't worry about figuring everything out at once. The journey is as important as the destination. He stood up. I'm going to take a shower, and then we can order something for dinner if you'd like. I've already had dinner, Mr. Kim, she said, feeling a little embarrassed for not having waited. But I can prepare something for you if you wish. Don't worry, he replied, a wave of his hand dismissing the offer. Just the fact that you're here and well is enough. Rest. Tomorrow is another day for new discoveries. As he walked away towards the bedroom, Ji-eun felt a wave of gratitude and a deep peace. That day had been a watershed moment. She wasn't just living in borrowed luxury, she was beginning to build a new version of herself. With the help of a man who saw beyond appearances, the miracle was unfolding, and she was ready for every new chapter. The next morning, Ji-eun woke with a sense of lightness she had never experienced. The sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating the apartment with a soft, golden glow. She didn't rush to the library immediately. Instead, she brewed some herbal tea and sat at the kitchen table, watching the city awaken. There was no longer the urgency of the past, the constant anxiety. There was only the present and the promise of a future she was beginning to shape. After tea, she returned to the library, but this time her choice was different. Instead of art history, she picked up a book on social entrepreneurship, a topic Min-jun had casually mentioned once. The words seemed to dance on the pages, and she found herself making notes, ideas bubbling in her mind. It was no longer just about learning, it was about applying, about dreaming of something she could build, something she could give back. Min-jun arrived earlier that day. The sound of the key in the lock made her rise from the library sofa, where she had been immersed in her readings. He entered, his jacket already unbuttoned, a tired but genuine smile on his lips when he saw her. "Good evening, Ji-eun," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I see the library still keeps you occupied." "Good evening, Mr. Kim," she replied, feeling a familiar warmth. "Yes. Today I was reading about social entrepreneurship. It's inspiring." He walked towards her, stopping a few feet away. His eyes scanned her face, and Ji-eun didn't look away. There was a new strength in her posture, a confidence he had planted, and that now blossomed. "Inspiring indeed," Min-jun agreed, his gaze fixed on hers. "I knew you would find your way, but Ji-eun, I didn't come to talk about books today." Her heart quickened. The air between them seemed to thicken, laden with a silent expectation. I've been thinking a lot," he continued, his voice a little deeper. "Since the party, since the moment I saw you. It wasn't just your dignity, Ji-eun. It was your strength, your resilience, your soul. I brought you here to give you a chance, yes, but in doing so, I gave myself a chance too." He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I'm not a man of many words when it comes to feelings, but I need to be clear. I admire you, Ji-eun. I respect you, and I care deeply about you, more than anyone else in a very long time." Ji-eun felt tears well up in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or humiliation. They were of overwhelming emotion, of recognition, of love. The silk handkerchief was in her pocket, and she clutched it. "Mr. Kim," she began, her voice choked. "Min-jun," He corrected her gently, reaching out to delicately touch her face. "Please, call me Min-Jun." She nodded, his hand warm and firm on her skin. "Min-Jun," she repeated, the name sounding natural on her lips. I care about you too. You gave me a world I never knew existed. You saw me when no one else did. You gave me the chance to be myself, to discover who I am." He smiled, a smile that reached his eyes, dispelling his tiredness. "And I want to continue to see who you become. I want to be by your side, Ji-un, not as your benefactor, but as your partner. I know our worlds are different, but I believe we can build a new world together, a world where your strength and your dignity are celebrated, and where we can find happiness in each other." Ji-un didn't hesitate. She leaned into him, and Min-Jun pulled her into a tender, respectful embrace. There was no rush, only the promise of a future. She felt the warmth of his body, the scent of his cologne, and knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Yes, Min-Jun," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Yes." At that moment, the dishwasher Lee Ji-Yoon, who had once been publicly humiliated, no longer existed. In her place was a new woman, full of potential, of dreams, and of a love that had defied all barriers. Redemption was not just a promise, it was a reality. And the romance, which began with a silk handkerchief and a look of respect, was just beginning, promising a life of discoveries and a love that transcended opulence and adversity. The final chapter of her humiliation had been written, and the first chapter of her new life alongside Kim Min-Jun was just beginning.